Turn the car around. Lorenzo Vitali's voice barely rose above the muted engine, yet the driver's hands tightened around the wheel. The armored sedan had already passed the restaurant, but Lorenzo had not taken his eyes from the tall windows glowing across the street. Beneath crystal chandeliers and warm amber light, Evelyn Hart sat across from Adrian Cole, the most dangerous businessman in Chicago, still pretending his hands were clean. Evie looked nothing like the woman who managed Lorenzo's calendar, memorized his protected routes, and arrived each morning in high-necked blouses and dark skirts designed to attract no attention. Tonight, she wore a wine-red dress with long sleeves and a clean, elegant neckline. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. She leaned toward Adrian with a smile Lorenzo had never seen directed at him. Then her hand settled over Adrian's. The lid of Lorenzo's silver DuPont lighter snapped beneath his thumb. The hinge shifted crooked, leaving a thin fracture across the polished edge. The driver glanced into the rearview mirror, caught the black ink covering Lorenzo's fingers and disappearing beneath his charcoal sleeve, then returned his attention to the road. "Boss." Lorenzo watched Adrian turn his palm beneath Evie's hand and close his fingers around hers. A muscle moved along Lorenzo's jaw. "Circle the block." Gabriel Knox shifted in the passenger seat. His gaze followed Lorenzo's through the tinted glass and stopped on the table inside. "That is Cole." Lorenzo rolled the damaged lighter between his fingers. "I know who he is." Gabriel studied Evie's smile. "Maybe this is not what it looks like." Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. People rely on that sentence when they do not like the truth in front of them. Inside the restaurant, Evie withdrew her hand and lifted her wine glass. Adrian leaned closer, his expression polished and confident, the kind worn by men who entered every room believing they already owned it. Lorenzo could not hear the conversation, but he saw Adrian glance toward Evie's purse. He saw her tilt her head. He saw the calm precision in her face. It looked intimate. Worse, it looked arranged. Something cold moved through Lorenzo's chest. Betrayal had a cleaner edge than anger. Evie knew every private meeting, every protected account, every warehouse that existed only on paper. For 6 years, she had been the one person he never checked twice. She carried documents no one else was allowed to touch. She corrected mistakes before anyone noticed them. She stood outside his office with coffee and answers as though she belonged to the building itself. Now she sat with Adrian Cole as though Lorenzo's empire were only another item on her schedule. Gabriel lowered his voice. "Do you want someone inside?" Lorenzo turned the lighter over and examined the crooked lid. "No." "Then what do you want?" Adrian reached into his jacket and placed a small black box on the table. Evie looked down at it, and her smile vanished for less than a second. Lorenzo caught the change. Her index finger tapped the stem of her glass 3 times. Soft, even, a habit she used when her thoughts were moving faster than her face. Lorenzo leaned forward. "Get the second car behind us." Gabriel touched the radio beneath his coat. "How many men?" Lorenzo watched Evie open the box. A silver key rested inside. Adrian pushed it toward her. She closed the lid and slipped the box into her purse. Only then did she glance toward the street. Her eyes settled almost directly on Lorenzo's sedan. She could not see through the dark glass, but her expression changed anyway. Not guilt, not fear, calculation. All of them. The driver guided the sedan into traffic. Gabriel kept one hand near the radio. "And Cole?" Lorenzo looked down at the broken lighter, then closed his fingers around it. "No one moves until I know what she gave him." Gabriel paused. "And if she gave him everything?" Lorenzo's attention returned to Evie as the restaurant disappeared behind them. "Then tomorrow, Evelyn Hart will walk into my office and explain why the only person I trusted was sitting across from my enemy." By 9 the next morning, Evelyn Hart was already standing outside Lorenzo Vitali's office with a porcelain cup balanced on one palm and a tablet tucked beneath her arm. Nothing in her posture suggested that she had spent the previous night across from Adrian Cole. Her dark uniform was buttoned to the collar, her hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, and the calm expression on her face belonged to the woman who had managed Lorenzo's empire for 6 years without once arriving late. The office doors opened before she touched them. Gabriel Knox stood inside beside the long black table, his broad shoulders blocking half the room. 3 security men waited behind him. Lorenzo remained at the window with his back turned. Morning light cut across the tattoo rising above his collar. but he did not move when Evie entered. She crossed the carpet, placed the coffee beside his right hand, and tapped the polished wood 3 times with her index finger. The sound was soft, precise, familiar. Lorenzo's eyes dropped to her hand. Evie folded both hands around the tablet as though nothing had happened. Your meeting with the Port Authority moved to 11:30. The attorney from New York will join by secure call. Lorenzo looked at the coffee but did not touch it. Anything else on my schedule I should know about? Evie's gaze held his for 1 second too long. Not unless someone changed it without telling me. Gabriel threw a thick folder onto the table. Paper slid across the wood and stopped inches from her wrist. Someone did more than change it. Evie did not flinch. On the top page was a screenshot from a private network, showing Lorenzo's route to a closed warehouse on the south side. The route had been posted less than an hour after she left the restaurant. Gabriel planted both palms on the table. That itinerary existed in 2 places. His encrypted device and yours. Evie adjusted her glasses with 1 finger. Then you have already narrowed the problem. To you. One of the guards near the door shifted his weight, barely hiding a smirk. Evie turned her head toward him. Her eyes paused on his left cuff, then on the second man's watch, then on the third man's shoes. 3 details. 3 silent calculations. Lorenzo noticed every one of them. Look at me. His voice carried no heat, which made the room colder. Evie faced him. Did you meet Adrian Cole last night? Her fingers tightened around the tablet. Only slightly. Yes. Gabriel's stare hardened. You are not even denying it. You did not ask me to. Lorenzo stepped away from the window. The ink along his forearm appeared as he rolled back one sleeve. Why were you there? Evie's eyes moved briefly toward the men at the door. Not in front of them. The nearest guard let out a quiet breath of disbelief. Gabriel's jaw set. You do not get to set conditions right now. Evie turned toward him, shoulders level. Then do not expect useful answers. Silence settled over the office. Lorenzo stopped beside the table. He studied her face, searching for the smallest crack. The woman in front of him looked exactly as she always did, yet everything about her felt different. Her breathing was controlled. Her voice remained even. Only the 3 taps against the desk betrayed that something beneath the surface was moving fast. Lorenzo slid the leaked itinerary toward her. This route was posted at 1:12 this morning. Evie glanced down. I know. Gabriel stared at her. How? Her eyes rose slowly. Because I saw it before your team did. One of the guards looked toward the others. A brief exchange. Too quick for most people. Not for Evie. Her attention returned to the man on the far right. A small crease in his cuff. A faint trace of printer toner on his thumb. Then she lowered her gaze and opened the tablet. Lorenzo watched her swipe past a screen filled with ordinary appointments. Show me. Evie locked the device before he could see more. Not yet. The guard on the right lifted his chin. Convenient. Evie gave him a polite smile that never reached her eyes. So is talking before you know what room you are in. Gabriel stepped between them. Enough. Lorenzo raised one hand. The entire office went still. His attention remained fixed on Evie. You met my rival. My schedule leaked. You knew before security. Give me one reason I should let you walk out of this room. Evie removed her glasses, cleaned one lens with the edge of her sleeve, then put them back on. Because if I wanted to destroy you, Lorenzo, you would not be reading about it on a screen. No one spoke. Evie picked up the coffee, moved it 2 inches closer to him, and turned toward the door. As she passed the 3 guards, her eyes settled once more on the man with toner on his thumb. This time, he looked away first. Lorenzo saw it. So did she. At the threshold, Evie paused without turning around. Keep tomorrow afternoon open. Gabriel's brow tightened. For what? Her hand rested on the brass handle. For the person who thinks he stole your schedule. Then she walked out, leaving Lorenzo with cold coffee, 3 silent guards, and the first clear sign that Evelyn Hart was not afraid of being watched. At 11:47 that night, Evelyn Hart sat alone beneath the amber lights of the Marrow Room, a basement bar hidden beneath an old hotel in River North. The place had no sign, no windows, and no customers who used their real names. A jazz record turned softly behind the counter, while Evie traced one fingertip around the rim of a glass she had not touched. Her dark uniform was gone. In its place was a black coat buttoned neatly over a plain navy dress, practical enough to disappear in a crowd. A silver brooch rested near her collarbone. No one looking at it would have guessed there was a camera behind the polished face. Evie checked the clock reflected in the mirror above the bottles. 11:48. 1 minute late. She kept her shoulders relaxed. Her right thumb pressed once against the inside of her ring, confirming the recorder was active. A tall figure appeared at the bottom of the stairs. Victor Kane, one of Lorenzo's senior guards, moved through the room with the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. He wore the same dark suit from the office, but the careful discipline was gone from his stride. He slid onto the stool beside her and placed a compact leather case between them. You picked a dramatic place. Evie kept her eyes on the mirror. You picked a careless time. Victor's mouth curved. You always sound like you are correcting someone's calendar. People make expensive mistakes when they ignore timing. He tapped 2 fingers against the case. Then let us not waste any. Evie turned toward him at last. The faint printer toner she had noticed that morning still marked the edge of his thumbnail. He had scrubbed his hands, but not well enough. Did anyone follow you? Victor gave a quiet laugh and looked around the nearly empty room. I am paid to notice that sort of thing. Evie's gaze drifted to the emergency exit, then to the bartender polishing the same glass for the 3rd time. That was not an answer. His expression tightened before smoothing itself back into charm. No one followed me. He pushed the leather case toward her. The locks opened with 2 clean clicks. Bundles of cash filled the interior, stacked so neatly they looked more like evidence than money. Evie did not move. Victor watched her face, waiting for surprise, greed, or fear. She gave him none of them. That is the first half. His finger rested on the edge of the case. The rest comes after tomorrow. Evie closed the lid with one hand. Keep it. The smile slipped from his mouth. You asked for payment. I asked whether you could produce it. Her eyes lowered briefly to his cuff. A fresh thread of gray fiber clung to the fabric, the same we've used in the restricted records room. Now I know you can. Victor leaned closer, keeping his voice beneath the music. Do not become difficult now. Cole is not patient. Evie lifted her glass and let the light pass through the amber liquid. Neither is Lorenzo. You sounded less loyal yesterday. Loyalty is a word men use when they want obedience without explanation. Victor studied her for a long moment. And what do you want? Evie opened her purse and removed a silver flash drive. She held it between 2 fingers, but did not release it. Proof that I am not risking my life for promises. His eyes sharpened. What is on it? Tomorrow's route. Victor extended his hand. Evie kept the drive just beyond his reach. Lorenzo leaves the private garage at 2:15. He will take the East Service Road to the Halstead warehouse. Victor's breathing changed, barely enough to notice. Security detail? Evie watched his pupils widen. None. His hand closed around the flash drive when she finally let go. He is going alone? That is what the file says. Victor turned the device beneath the light, greed flashing across his face before he concealed it. The brooch captured everything. Evie folded her hands in her lap. You will confirm the meeting with Cole tonight. Already done. Then tomorrow ends this. Victor tucked the drive inside his jacket. Tomorrow begins it. Evie looked down at the untouched case between them. For you, perhaps. His eyes narrowed. What does that mean? She stood, drew on her gloves, and placed a folded receipt beneath her glass. It means men like you always confuse access with control. Victor rose halfway from his stool. You are forgetting who has the evidence now. Evie paused beside him and adjusted the lapel of his coat with 2 precise fingers. The gesture looked almost friendly. Her voice dropped to a murmur. No, Victor. I am counting on it. Then she walked toward the stairs without looking back, while behind the silver brooch, the hidden camera continued recording his satisfied smile. Gabriel Knox had placed a tracker beneath Victor Kane's sedan 12 minutes after Evelyn Hart left Lorenzo's office. By 2 o'clock the next afternoon, the signal had stopped at an abandoned warehouse on Halstead Street, the same location hidden inside the route Evie had refused to explain. Lorenzo Vitali watched the pulsing marker on Gabriel's phone from the back seat of the armored sedan. You stay outside. Gabriel's eyes lifted to the warehouse beyond the tinted glass. That defeats the purpose of bringing security. Lorenzo opened the door. The purpose was finding her. Gabriel caught the edge of the door before it closed. We do not know what is waiting inside. Lorenzo glanced toward the upper windows, where a faint shadow moved behind the glass. I know exactly who is inside. Before Gabriel could answer, Lorenzo crossed the empty lot alone. Inside the warehouse, Evelyn stood behind a stack of freight crates in the upper control room. one hand resting near the silver brooch at her collar. Below, Victor paced beside Adrian Cole beneath white industrial lights. The silver flash drive lay open on a folding table between them. Adrian checked his watch, then looked toward the vacant service entrance. He should be here. Victor rubbed the edge of his cuff. The route was exact. Evie watched them through the one-way glass. 3 additional men waited near the east corridor. 2 more occupied the stairwell. Behind reinforced security doors, the private response team she had assembled remained silent, each member waiting for her signal. Gabriel was the only person inside Lorenzo's organization who knew that second layer existed. He had agreed to keep it from Lorenzo until the evidence was complete. Evie touched the inside of her ring once. A green light blinked across the control panel. 7 minutes remained before the final recording uploaded to 3 protected servers. Adrian lifted the flash drive. If she gave you false information, your usefulness ends today. Victor's face tightened. She gave me what she had. Evie's mouth flattened. He still believed he had stolen the route from her. Good. The trap required confidence. The west door opened without warning. Lorenzo entered beneath the hard glare of the overhead lights, his charcoal coat unfastened, the black ink along his throat visible above his collar. One hand remained near the inside of his jacket, but he drew nothing. His attention moved from Adrian to Victor, then rose toward the control room. His eyes found Evie behind the glass as though the wall had vanished. The look in them was not rage. It was worse. Hurt held behind discipline. This meeting was not on my calendar. Adrian opened his hands. Yet you found it. Victor stepped away from the table. Boss, you need to listen. Lorenzo's gaze cut toward him. You lost the right to ask for patience. Evie left the control room and descended the metal stairs. Each footstep echoed through the warehouse. Lorenzo watched her approach, his expression locked into stillness. You should not be here. She stopped halfway down. Gabriel tracked Victor. Because you gave us nothing. Adrian's eyes shifted between them, quick and alert. This is more useful than expected. Lorenzo ignored him. You met Cole. You passed Victor my route. Now I find all 3 of you waiting in an empty building. Evie kept one hand on the railing. You were supposed to stay at headquarters. You stopped giving me reasons to trust instructions. The words came quietly, but the fracture beneath them reached her. Victor glanced toward Adrian. Evie saw recognition pass between them. Not the whole plan. Enough. Adrian turned toward the east corridor. She set us up. Evie reached the warehouse floor. You finally noticed. The men near the corridor moved into position, blocking the nearest exits. Lorenzo shifted at once, placing himself between Evie and Adrian. How many men? More than there were before you walked in. Her eyes flicked toward the control panel above. The green light turned red. Someone had interrupted the upload. Victor moved behind Evie and caught her arm, pulling her back before Lorenzo could reach her. A concealed weapon appeared near her shoulder, held as a warning rather than pressed against her. The room froze. Victor's breathing changed near her ear. No one moves. Lorenzo stopped, both hands visible. The men around Adrian widened their circle. Evie kept her face composed. You should have taken the money. Victor tightened his grip. You should have cleaned the toner from your thumb. Lorenzo's eyes sharpened. Release her. Adrian collected the flash drive from the table. You came because you believed she betrayed you. That almost made this simple. Lorenzo glanced toward Evie. Almost. Adrian's smile returned. Now your distrust has given us leverage. Evie ignored him. Her attention stayed on Lorenzo. One glance toward the ceiling. One toward the sealed east door. Then back to his face. He understood the truth too late. She had built a closed system. His arrival had opened it. Victor drew her one step farther from the stairs. Tell your people to stand down. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. They are not mine. Adrian looked toward the hidden security doors. Then whose are they? Evie lifted her chin and met Lorenzo's stare. For one suspended second, neither moved. Then she blinked twice. Lorenzo moved the instant Evelyn blinked twice. He lowered himself behind the folding table as Victor's attention followed him for half a second. Evie used that opening to turn sharply, slip her arm free, and step out of Victor's reach. Her thumb pressed the center of the ring on her right hand. The ring did not control the warehouse by itself. It sent an encrypted signal to the emergency system she had rewritten the night before. A low mechanical alarm rolled through the building. Steel shutters descended over the loading doors, then sealed the side corridors one after another. Adrian turned toward the nearest exit just as the final barrier locked into place. Red emergency lights washed across the concrete walls. Victor stared at the closed doors, his confidence fading. "What did you do?" Evie straightened the sleeve of her navy dress. "I restored the plan you interrupted." Lorenzo rose slowly, his attention fixed on her rather than the men around them. Above the control room, a green indicator flashed back to life. The interrupted upload resumed. One protected server accepted the recording, then a second, then a third. Behind the reinforced security doors, locks released in sequence. 6 members of a private corporate response team entered in dark uniforms, moving with calm precision. They carried identification from an independent risk firm, not the Vitali organization. Gabriel Knox came through behind them, a tablet in one hand. Adrian looked from Gabriel to Evie. "Those are Vitali people." Gabriel stopped beside her. "No, they are licensed investigators contracted for this operation." Lorenzo's eyes settled on him. "You knew?" Gabriel held his stare. "She gave me enough evidence to justify a separate team. She asked me not to bring it to you until the leak was confirmed." A quiet anger moved across Lorenzo's face. "And you agreed?" Gabriel glanced toward Victor. "Because the leak was inside your security division." Evie pointed toward the men near the east corridor. "Separate everyone. Collect every phone, access card, key, and watch. Record the chain of custody." The team obeyed without hesitation. No one was struck. No one needed to be. Doors were sealed, exits were controlled, and every device in the room had already begun transmitting location data to the investigation server. Victor took one step toward the folding table. Gabriel raised an open hand and blocked his path. "Stay where you are." Victor's eyes narrowed at Evie. "You planned this from the beginning." She picked up the silver flash drive and examined it beneath the emergency light. "Not from the beginning. From the moment you opened a restricted file you had no reason to access." Adrian adjusted his cuffs, attempting to recover the polished calm he had carried into the warehouse. "You are an assistant pretending to run an intelligence operation." Evie slipped the drive into an evidence pouch. "And you brought 6 men to meet one assistant." His expression tightened. Lorenzo looked toward the ring on her hand, then at the restored control panel. "How long have you been building this?" 3 weeks. The answer landed between them. "You knew there was a leak for 3 weeks?" Evie turned toward him. "I knew there were 3 possible sources." Gabriel handed her a tablet recovered from Victor's coat. She entered a code, opened the message archive, and rotated the screen toward Lorenzo. "I created 3 versions of tomorrow's route. Accounting received one. Operations received another. Security received Halstead." Lorenzo's gaze moved to Victor. He forwarded it. 11 minutes after opening the file. Victor's mouth parted, but Evie continued before he could answer. "The route was false. The warehouse was chosen because I could control every camera, entrance, and data channel." Lorenzo stepped closer. "Why did you not tell me?" Evie held his gaze. "Because you would have confronted him before I found the buyer." "I did confront him. You arrived early, entered a controlled operation, and gave them a way to change the terms." Gabriel looked down at his tablet, wisely silent. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "You expected me to ignore my assistant meeting my enemy. I expected 6 years of trust to survive one unexplained evening." The words left no room for defense. Across the room, Adrian's phone began vibrating inside a clear evidence pouch. Once, twice, then continuously. Evie turned toward it. Her face did not lose its calm, but the focus in her eyes sharpened. "Bring me that phone." Gabriel carried it over. The screen displayed a series of encrypted alerts. Evie connected it to the investigation tablet and opened a hidden network map. 5 family names appeared around a web of banks, freight terminals, insurance firms, and shell companies. A digital clock counted down from 9 hours. Lorenzo moved beside her. "What am I looking at?" Evie enlarged the financial routes. This warehouse was not the attack. Gabriel studied the screen. Then what was it? Her finger stopped over a command scheduled for midnight. A distraction. While we were watching one trader, 5 families prepared to freeze your accounts, isolate your ports, and collapse every legitimate company carrying the Vitali name. Lorenzo's eyes moved across the map. "Can they do it?" Evie looked at the falling clock. "Not if we reach headquarters before they realize Adrian has lost his phone." The countdown on Adrian Cole's phone continued to fall. each passing second reflected across Evelyn Hart's glasses. 8 hours, 52 minutes remained. 5 family names formed a ring around the center of the map, connected by routes leading into banks, freight terminals, insurance carriers, and shell companies tied to Lorenzo's legitimate holdings. Evie enlarged the network with 2 fingers. They are not attacking your people. They are attacking confidence. Lorenzo stepped beside her, close enough to see the smallest account numbers. Explain. She pointed to 3 marked institutions. At midnight, they trigger false compliance alerts, freeze your operating accounts, and release fabricated records linking your companies to stolen federal contracts. By sunrise, lenders panic, partners retreat, and every port carrying the Vitali name slows to a stop. Gabriel Knox folded his arms. That requires coordination from inside and outside the company. Evie looked toward Adrian, which is why he needed access to Lorenzo's private systems. Adrian's polished expression thinned. You do not understand what you are looking at. Evie carried the phone toward him and held it at chest level. Unlock the protected folder. He leaned against the folding table. No. She turned the screen so he could see the device log. His own name appeared beside a transfer authorization, followed by timestamps connecting him to the 5 families. Refuse, and the investigators preserve the phone exactly as it is. Cooperate, and the record shows you helped stop the attack before midnight. Adrian's eyes shifted toward the licensed response team securing the warehouse. No one threatened him. No one needed to. The evidence had already made the choice narrow. You think that changes anything? Evie placed the phone on the table. It changes what the prosecutors, regulators, and 5 families believe you intended. His jaw tightened. After several seconds, he pressed his thumb to the sensor. The hidden dashboard opened. Evie took the device back immediately and moved out of reach. 5 accounts appeared, each tied to a separate family. Beneath them waited a single command scheduled for midnight. Gabriel leaned closer. Can you stop it here? Evie scanned the authorization chain. No. The warehouse network can read the plan, but it cannot override Vitali's central servers. Lorenzo rested one hand on the table. Then we returned to headquarters. I need the private ledgers, port insurance files, and unrestricted authority over every account connected to Vitali Holdings. Adrian released a quiet laugh. The council will never give an assistant that kind of control. Evie opened another encrypted folder. You should worry less about what they will give me and more about what you already gave away. Messages appeared between Adrian and representatives of the 5 families. Lorenzo read the first exchange, then the next. His eyes hardened. You copied his authorization chain at dinner. Evie removed the small black box Adrian had given her and set it beside the phone. Inside, beneath the silver key, sat a proximity transmitter no larger than a quarter. The key was decoration. The transmitter needed 10 seconds beside an unlocked device. When Adrian placed his phone on the table, it captured the temporary session token and mirrored the authorization path. Gabriel examined the box. That is how you entered the hidden network. Evie nodded. Not by touching his hand, by keeping his attention away from the device long enough for the transfer to finish. Lorenzo glanced toward the wine-red scarf folded. Inside her purse, then back to her face. You let him believe the evening was personal. I let him believe what made him careless. Silence settled between them. Lorenzo's thumb moved once along the damaged hinge of his lighter before he placed it in his pocket. I saw you through the window. Evie's eyes stayed on the map. I know. He turned toward her. You knew I was there? I saw the sedan reflected in the glass. I hoped you would leave. Gabriel looked toward the far side of the warehouse, giving them the privacy of distance without actually moving. Lorenzo's voice lowered. I thought you had chosen his side. Evie finally met his gaze. You thought 6 years of loyalty could be erased by one dress and one smile. The accusation was quiet enough to make it impossible to dismiss. Lorenzo held her stare, but no defense came. The phone vibrated again. A new message appeared across the screen. Phase 1 advanced. Council confirmation required by 6:30. Evie checked the time. 4:18. We have 2 hours before the families test their internal links. Lorenzo straightened. Then we leave now. Adrian's eyes narrowed. The council will block her before she reaches the main console. Lorenzo looked toward him with a calm that carried more weight than anger. Then the council is about to learn who kept this empire alive while they were protecting their chairs. Evie gathered the phone, the transmitter, and the flash drive. There is one more problem. Lorenzo paused near the exit. She enlarged the map and revealed a sixth marker concealed beneath the Vitali crest. Unlike the others, its signal originated from inside headquarters. Gabriel's expression changed. Victor was not the highest person they bought. Evie tracked the signal to the council chamber. One active credential pulsed beside the authorization gate. She turned the screen toward Lorenzo. Someone at your own table is waiting to open the door for them. The council chamber at Vitali headquarters was already in chaos when Evelyn Hart entered at 5:23. 12 men occupied the long walnut table, their voices colliding beneath the brass lights. Financial reports lay open in front of them, covered with red alerts and frozen account notices. At the far end, Lorenzo Vitali stood beside the empty chair at the head of the table. Gabriel Knox remained near the door, one hand resting over a folder of evidence. Evie carried only a black notebook and Adrian Cole's phone. The room quieted for less than a second when they saw her, then erupted again. Carlo DeSantis, the oldest member of the council, struck the table with his palm. This meeting is restricted. Evie stopped near the wall and adjusted her glasses. Then you should have secured your network. A few men shifted in their seats. Carlo's mouth tightened. You are not here to lecture us. No. I am here because 5 families plan to empty your accounts before midnight. Marcus Bellini, head of the Northern Ports, leaned back and looked her over with open contempt. And we are expected to believe the office assistant discovered what our bankers missed. Evie opened her notebook but did not answer. Her silence irritated them more than any defense could have. Another elder pushed a report across the table. $40 million is already under review. 3 insurers suspended coverage. We need experienced men handling this. Evie's thumb tapped once against the notebook's edge. Lorenzo noticed. So did Gabriel. She was counting, not trembling. Carlo pointed toward the door. Remove her before she causes more confusion. Lorenzo's gaze moved around the table. She stays. This is not a staff meeting. Carlo rose, his chair scraping against the floor. A heavy-set assistant with a notebook does not belong in a financial war. Evie lifted her eyes. No anger crossed her face, only recognition. She had heard versions of that sentence for years, spoken in offices, elevators, restaurants, and hallways by men who mistook visibility for authority. Her fingers closed around the notebook, then relaxed. Lorenzo stepped away from the head of the table. The movement was slow enough to silence the nearest voices. He crossed the room and stopped in front of Evie. For one moment, he looked at the chair behind him, then at her. Sit. Evie did not move. That is your seat. Lorenzo held out his hand. Not tonight. The council watched as she placed her palm in his. He led her to the head of the table, pulled the chair back, and waited. Evie's expression remained unreadable, but her grip tightened briefly around his fingers before she released them and sat down. Lorenzo planted both hands on the tabletop beside her. The dark ink across his knuckles stood out against the polished wood. He leaned toward Carlo, his voice low and even. From this moment forward, her instructions carry my authority. Carlo stared at him. You are surrendering control to a secretary. Lorenzo's eyes hardened. I am giving control to the person who found the traitor, built the counter-operation, and recovered the plan while the rest of you argued over titles. Marcus pushed back from the table. This is reckless. Gabriel opened the folder and scattered printed messages across the center. Names, transfers, and encrypted approvals filled the pages. Reckless would be ignoring the only person in this building who understands the entire attack. Carlo looked toward Evie. And what exactly does she propose? Evie removed Adrian's phone from her bag and placed it beside the notebook. The countdown now showed 6 hours, 31 minutes. She looked from one man to the next, allowing the silence to lengthen until every eye was on her. First, no one leaves this room. Marcus's hand paused near his coat pocket. Evie saw it. Second, every personal device goes on the table. A murmur moved around the chamber. Carlo folded his arms. On whose order? Lorenzo straightened behind her. Mine. Evie glanced up at him. He corrected himself without hesitation. Hers. One by one, phones appeared on the walnut surface. Marcus placed his down last. Evie watched the delay, then opened her notebook. Third, we stopped defending the empire they expect us to defend. Carlo frowned. Meaning? She turned Adrian's screen toward the council, revealing the web connecting the 5 families. They believe fear will make you protect your own accounts first. They are counting on each of you to act separately. Her fingertip moved across the names. So we will give them exactly what they want to see. Lorenzo rested one hand on the back of her chair. And what will they see? Evie removed her glasses and placed them on the table. For the first time, nothing softened her stare. A collapse. Several men exchanged uneasy looks. Marcus's face lost color. Evie opened the central server console and entered the first command. By midnight, 5 families will believe they have destroyed us. Her finger hovered above the confirmation key. They will not realize we are destroying them first. Evelyn Hart pressed the confirmation key at 8:17, and the first controlled leak entered the private network. A false compliance alert appeared on the Romano family dashboard, warning that Calder had begun moving protected funds into an offshore reserve. 30 seconds later, Calder received a mirrored notice claiming Romano had frozen their shared shipping account. Nothing Evie sent could directly seize an enemy bank account. It did not need to. Adrian Cole's stolen network gave her access to the messages, contingency plans, and authorization codes the 5 families had prepared to betray one another. She only had to place the right truth beside the right lie. The council watched red indicators spread across the wall display. Evie sat at the head of the table without her glasses, her shoulders still, her hands moving with measured speed. Sell the Chicago freight position. Carlo DeSantis leaned forward. That account supports 3 terminals. Evie kept her eyes on the screen. For 11 minutes. The sale activates the insurance clause they believe they compromised. Lorenzo stood behind her chair, one tattooed hand resting against the walnut edge. Executed. A council banker entered the order. The position dipped, then triggered an automatic review inside Romano's system. Evie opened a second channel. Release the Calder audit file to DeLuca. Use Adrian's authorization key. Gabriel Knox watched the transmission clear. They will assume Cole changed sides. They already expect him to. Evie sent a freight delay notice through a legitimate port management account. Post the warehouse for delay using Calder's authorization code. A reply appeared on the secure console. Confirmed. Marcus Bellini shifted in his chair. Romano will interpret that as Calder seizing the route. Evie looked at him for the first time. You understand their internal assumptions very well. Marcus folded his hands. I understand ports. Then you understand why your northern terminal has not received a single alert. A small pause crossed his face before he recovered it. Lorenzo saw the hesitation. So did Gabriel. At 8:41, Romano suspended a transfer promise to DeLuca. At 8:53, DeLuca released proof that Santoro had prepared to abandon the alliance after the attack. Calder responded by freezing access to a shared reserve. Evie had not taken control of their institutions. She had used their own contracts, automated safeguards, and private suspicions to make each family protect itself first. The map changed color as trust disappeared from one connection after another. Carlo's earlier contempt had faded into careful attention. How did you know they would fracture this quickly? Evie opened a file containing unpaid debts, contested routes, broken agreements, and years of private accusations. Because they did not build an alliance. They built a waiting room for betrayal. Lorenzo bent slightly toward her. What do you need? Her fingers moved to the next command. No interruptions for 20 minutes. The corner of his mouth lifted. You have them. At 9:12, the first family withdrew its midnight authorization. At 9:26, 2 others locked each other out of the shared operating fund. Evie gave each instruction in a voice that never rose. Freeze our Marquette reserve under the emergency clause. Move the port insurance balance into the protected holding account. Release the second ledger. Wait 90 seconds. Men who had dismissed her less than 3 hours earlier now watched her before touching a keyboard. Marcus reached toward his phone, then stopped when Gabriel placed one hand over the device. Council rules remain in effect. Marcus's eyes hardened. This has become theater. Evie replaced her glasses and enlarged the internal access log. One credential had opened a hidden channel 3 minutes before every enemy. Response. The signal came from the Northern Port Administrator account. Marcus's account. Lorenzo stepped away from Evie's chair and moved into Marcus's path. Sit down. Marcus remained standing. You are letting her turn a temporary crisis into a seizure of power. Evie rotated the screen toward the council. At 7:59, your credentials restored Adrian's access after Victor was detained. At 8:22, you warned Romano that the first alert was false. At 8:36, you sent Calder our port position. Carlos stared at the timestamps. You opened the internal gate. Marcus looked around the table, searching for support that no longer existed. Those records can be fabricated. Gabriel placed Adrian's recovered phone beside Marcus's tablet. The authentication signatures match. The independent server recorded both devices before they entered this room. Marcus's jaw tightened. You have no authority to remove me. Evie folded her hands over the closed notebook. The emergency governance clause does. Carlo opened the corporate bylaws and found the marked section Gabriel had placed before him. Evie continued without looking away from Marcus. Suspend his credentials. Freeze his voting rights pending an outside audit. Transfer operational control of the northern ports to the interim committee. Carlo hesitated, then placed his ring on the table. I support the motion. One by one, the other council members followed. Lorenzo did not speak for them. He did not need to. Marcus's name disappeared from the system at 9:48. At 10:03, the final family withdrew from the midnight operation. At 10:14, every protected Vitali account returned to normal status. The entire counterattack had taken 1 hour and 57 minutes. No celebration followed. The council chamber remained silent as the final graph turned green. Carlo closed the bylaws and looked toward Evie. We nearly lost the company because we treated the person who understood it best as furniture. Evie placed her glasses on the table. Do not apologize with poetry. Change the structure that made it possible. Lorenzo's eyes settled on her, and this time the respect in them required no translation. The following afternoon, the council reconvened with outside counsel, the independent auditor, and every voting member present. The emergency resolution lay open at the center of the table. It appointed Evelyn Hart as co-chief executive officer of Vitali Holdings, granted her independent authority over intelligence and risk operations, and required her written approval for any action that could endanger civilian employees or destabilize the company. A separate voting agreement gave her equal decision-making power with Lorenzo on acquisitions, executive appointments, and protected assets, regardless of the existing equity split. Carlos signed first. The others followed. Lorenzo added his signature last, then slid the completed resolution toward Evie. This does not repay 6 years. She read every page before touching the pen. It is not supposed to. What is it supposed to do? Evie looked up. Make the next 6 different. She signed. Late that evening, after the lawyers had left and the city lights reflected across the empty strategy room, Lorenzo found her reviewing the final audit. 2 chairs now stood at the head of the table. He remained beside the second one rather than taking it. A small velvet box rested in his hand. Evie noticed it, but continued reading. Before you open that, we need to finish something. Lorenzo set the box on the table without lifting the lid. I was wrong. Her pen stopped. About Adrian? About trust. He moved no closer. I watched one unexplained evening and treated 6 years of loyalty as if they had no weight. Then I entered your operation because jealousy felt easier than patience. Evie closed the folder. You did not only doubt me. You made a decision about me without giving me a voice. Lorenzo lowered his eyes for a moment, then met hers again. I did. I cannot change that night. I can change what I do next. She studied him in silence. There was no command in his posture, no expectation hidden beneath the apology. Only an answer waiting to be judged. What happens next time I tell you to stay out of an operation? His mouth shifted faintly. I ask for the risk assessment and remain where you put me. And when you think protection gives you authority over my choices, you remind me that it does not. Evie leaned back. I should not have to remind you twice. You will not. Only then did Lorenzo open the box. A deep red diamond rested against black silk, bright beneath the low light. My mother wore this once. She told me it should belong to the woman who could stand beside me without becoming smaller. Evie looked at the stone, then at the signed resolution between them. That sounds like a crown. It is not an office. Good. I already negotiated the office. A quiet laugh escaped him, brief and real. He left the box where it was. Then choose what the diamond means. Evie rose and walked around the table. She stopped an arm's length away, close enough to accept him, far enough to remain entirely free. It does not mean I belong to you. Lorenzo's hand stayed at his sides. No, it does not replace the contract. Nothing does. And it does not make me decorative. His gaze held hers. You made that impossible long before tonight. Evie closed the velvet box and placed it beside the two signatures. Then I will decide when to wear it. Lorenzo nodded once. That is the only answer I wanted. She looked toward the two chairs at the head of the room. For years, she had entered carrying coffee, schedules, and solutions credited to someone else. Now her name stood beside his on the corporate resolution, her authority fixed in writing rather than borrowed from his favor. Evie placed her hand on the back of the second chair. There is one more condition. Lorenzo waited. Outside this building, no orders. No decisions about my life without me. No mistaking love for control. He moved beside the first chair but did not touch her. Agreed. Her expression softened, not because he had offered wealth, protection, or status, but because he had finally left the choice in her hands. Then I choose to stay. The next morning, the council entered to find Lorenzo already standing behind one chair and Evie reviewing the first report from the other. No coffee waited beside him. No tablet was held against her chest. Carlo opened the meeting, glanced toward Lorenzo out of habit, then corrected himself and turned to both of them. Evie closed the report, raised her eyes, and rested one hand on the table that had once been used to exclude her. Proceed. This time, every person in the room moved on her word.